Henry Beston once said, "We need another and a wiser and perhaps a more mystical concept of animals. At present, we see their whole image in distortion. We patronize them for their incompleteness, for their tragic fate of having taken form so far below ourselves. And therein we err, and greatly err. For the animals shall not be measured by man. In a world older and more complete than ours, they move finished and complete, gifted with extension of the senses we have lost or never attained, living by voices we shall never hear. They are not brethren. They are not underlings. They are other nations, caught with ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow prisoners of the splendor and travail of earth."
I'll take the children with me when I go out to see all of the animals in the zoo. Once we get through the gate, well, we won't have to wait to see all the animals in the zoo. Ride, pony, ride, not far from my side. You won't take my lovely one from me. Ride, pony, ride, not far from my side. You won't take my lovely one from me.
Seattle has one of the finest zoos in the world, though at times its very existence seems uncertain. The Seattle Zoo started as a sideshow at Woodland Park, a neighborhood picnic and recreation area at the junction between the growing suburb of Wallingford and the already bustling city of Ballard. The new park inherited a few wild animals, which required the development of a zoological garden area for proper display. If you went to Woodland Park or enjoyed the water sports area or paths for strolling around adjoining Green Lake, no Sunday outing was complete without a free trip past the exotic menagerie pacing the cages of the zoo. The zoo added buildings, concrete grottos, and animal houses, but the Woodland Park Zoo was essentially an added free attraction in the array of benefits that living in Seattle offered working-class families. All this was to change when Seattle voters passed the forward thrust bond issue, which included zoo improvement funds. Several years passed. Seattle hired English-born David Hancock as design analyst. A children's zoo had already been built before Hancock's arrival. A year after it was completed, Hancock had been appointed director. A comprehensive plan presented by Hancock and his former associates at Jones & Jones was approved by the city council. The revolutionary plan replaced cramped, depressing, and often unhealthy conventional animal cages with more natural environments, cleverly sculpted to give the illusion of open space where animals mixed just as they would in the wild, free to roam, graze, and play. And the zoo stopped being free. With the new zoo came a new fee.
You can tell by the care with which the lions wear their hair. There's a regal bearing to their style. Their look says, "Listen, my friend, we're the best that's ever been." There's a regal bearing to their style. Pride, lion pride, that you can never hide, superior to everything you see. Pride, lion pride, that you can never hide, superior to everything you see.
The center ring in the new Seattle Zoo is its African savanna exhibit, justly world famous. Imagine being able to stroll through a rolling landscape inhabited by stately giraffes, springboks and their fawn, zebras, hippos, and the playful patus monkey families feeding at ease. Moving on, you pass fortified readouts where you can look out at the king of beasts himself, lazily basking with all his family in their splendor.
Have you ever felt the stillness of the veldt? Ever seen a giraffe in full stride? His legs are so long, but they are very strong. Ever seen a giraffe in full stride? Stride, giraffe, stride, not far from giraffe stride not far from my side, underneath the overhanging trees.
Perhaps the favorite inhabitant of Seattle's old zoo was the tragic comic Bobo. Bobo was a gorilla who had been raised with humans, unlike these orangutans, the current residents of Bobo's old apartments in the zoo's outmoded primate house. Bobo's romance with Fifi, a less inhibited female gorilla, was the subject of daily gossip around town for many years. If you really want to understand what makes Seattle's new zoo so special, think about these bleak, jail-like cages, the freak show viewing conditions of the old primate house, and then compare that with the world's largest gorilla exhibit, where a family of these great apes carries on its everyday life in a shelter that actually allows zoo visitors to get closer to them than was ever possible in their old quarters. These new facilities put people at the back door of the gorilla shelter unobtrusively, while the gorillas face a forest glade. Here they can wander off for privacy, meditation, and natural recreation. Director-designer Hancox would not let his vision be limited by the funds then available to him. Working closely with two of his former associates at Jones & Jones, the principal architects for the zoo project, he envisioned a whole series of self-contained zoo environments where animals could flourish amid the same vegetation with the same creatures for neighbors that they would know in the wild. The result is an unfinished symphony of fascinating zoological exhibits.
You can tell by the way that the prairie dogs play to happy little animals in the zoo. Where your mother's found, that's where you'll stick around, just to happy animals in the zoo. Hide, prairie dog, hide, home is warm inside, and you know it's safe underground. Hide, prairie dog, hide, home is warm inside, and you know it's safe underground.
The prairie dog, for instance, is the only current resident of the Great Plains exhibit. The zoo eventually plans to house these irrepressible subterraneans in rounded hillocks modeled after a North Dakota grassland, surrounding him with such animals as the North American bison or buffalo, the pronghorn sheep, jackrabbits, ground squirrels, and sharp-tailed grouse. For now, the exhibit seems to be, with the exception of the prairie dogs, a wasteland patrolled by crows. The shadow of funlessness has fallen over the zoo's comprehensive plan. New sources must be found if Hancock's dreams are to be realized.
I know we'll see so many birds that we'll be lost for words. Lots of things to see down at the zoo. Many animals to see. Big kids know that they aren't free. Lots of things to see down at the zoo. Glide, Black Swan, glide to the other side. You sure are a pretty thing to see. Glide, Black Swan, glide to the other side. You sure are a pretty thing to see.
Many species of birds can be glimpsed in the zoo in environments so inviting that our own local species have tried to take up residence alongside them. Neatly marked ducks, elegant white peacocks, raucous blackbirds, and motley colored pigeons continually parade around and fly over the almost invisible tent-like aviaries that dot the zoo. The Walk Through Swamp and Marsh exhibit is housed in one of these invisible tents. Modeled after similar marshes in rural New England, this beautiful exhibit houses birds like the black-crowned night herons, red-winged blackbird, and green heron. Its environment is so natural that visitors can come very close to the birds without disturbing them. See the beauty of Hancock's vision and contrast it with the ruin of an aviary that still holds several bird species and once was the zoo's only ornithological exhibit. How pathetically unnatural we find the sad home of the American bald eagle, our symbol of strength and freedom, trapped in a wire enclosure where he cannot fly and can barely flap his wings. But all of Hancock's plans have not been crowned with success. A snow leopard breeding project was begun in a setting that recreated the craggy rock slopes of the big cat's mountainous homeland, but leopard mothers abandon their offspring when upset by the ear-splitting drone of miniature hydroplane races going on at nearby Green Lake. And while local residents and zoo staff both seem interested in stopping or limiting the nuisance caused by the races, Parks Department officials appear indifferent to inhabitants of both environments, neighborhood and zoo, with the result that the races continue and the snow leopard breeding project could be doomed.
You can tell in the way that the elephants seem to say they're too big or their cage is too small. The elephant can't get out, he might scare us with his shout. They're too big or their cage is too small. Don't slide, elephant, slide, it's awfully close inside. You can hardly even turn around. Don't slide, elephant, slide, it's awfully close inside. You can hardly even turn around.
Even more serious, while the Hancock's plan provided for rare black rhinoceri the zoo has not yet been able to procure, no quarters were planned for a species that is one of any zoo's favorite residents. What would a zoo be without elephants? The Elephant House at Woodland Park is one of the country's better facilities for this largest of land animals. And the elephants enjoy more humanely spacious quarters than many of their old zoo neighbors, like the birds of prey and monkeys. But inside the house that keeps the pachyderms safe from vandals and Seattle's ever inclement weather, conditions are far from utopian. You have to wonder why, with the enormous sums spent on new zoo construction, a little money could not have been set aside to keep the Elephant House from degenerating to the point where it is structurally unsafe and virtually unsalvageable. You would think that out of over $7 million in construction funds, the zoo could have bought paint that matched previous coats. No one seeing the pathetic state of these patient giants can debate that their present quarters are too small and impose degrading and even unhealthy conditions on these dignified and sensitive creatures, especially during Seattle's cold and rainy winters. One thing no picture can show is the smell of these animals. Standing in their own excrement, they have developed painful foot infections. What will become of them? Will the city ever be able to support a construction program that will give them the comfort of their new zoo neighbors? The zoo administration, also recruited from Jones & Jones, currently puts the responsibility on the Seattle public. Seattle residents suddenly find themselves the owners of a half-finished zoo with hardly enough money to care for existing animals or to maintain the structures that had served at least adequately, if not comfortably, before the new construction was begun. Seattle's new zoo has won awards from architects and other zookeepers. There's no doubt that the community is impressed by it. But bad feeling and suspicion remains when the director of what had been a free public facility walled the non-paying public out. Are Seattle's wonders only to be available to the affluent? David Hancock was displeased when Seattle balked at funding his project through to its conclusion. So displeased that he suggested the zoo should be dismantled if it could not be completed. He resigned the zoo directorship to be succeeded by the then president of Jones & Jones. Recently, Hancock has formulated a proposal for the redesign of Seattle Center, again to be implemented by his friends at Jones & Jones. Will he try to wall the recession-impoverished public out? Will he again design a construction program our city cannot afford to finish, as a current editorial in the Seattle Weekly has suggested? In an era when the public has been burned again and again by cost overrun projects that deliver unasked-for goods at unforeseen expense, it would behoove the city and its planning authorities to look into the depth of public support for projects before it embarks on them. It will take more than money to clear out the jungle inside the Seattle Zoo. It will take a renewal of public faith that its voice, as well as that of the planning experts, will be heard and heeded, and that Seattle will get the kind of zoo it needs, as well as the kind that some developers want.
I'll take the children with me when I go out to see all of the animals in the zoo.